Morning, everyone. 10 o'clock. We have a quorum. I'll call the meeting of the Electoral Area Service Committee of December 10th, 2025 to order. The chair acknowledges we're located in the traditional territory of the Lashwatach people, and the first item of business is the adoption of the public agenda.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you, Director Rice. All those in favor? That's carried. Do you want to change, Brad? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I have an item of new business that I would like to add to the agenda, and it is an item called aquaculture.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
So
Move.
moved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? It's unanimous. It's carried. No petition or delegations. Previous minutes for adoption.
Move adoption.
Second.
This is November 5, 2025. All those in favor? Unanimous and carried. No, or is there any new business? Business arising from the minutes? Nothing? No public consideration, notice of motions or chairs reports. We're on the staff reports. Number 1. Do we have a delegation?
No.
Oh, it's okay. Yes.
Okay. So staff reports. Number 1, Electoral Area C official community plan for receipt.
Move receipt.
Seconder?
Second.
Thank you. Treasurer Vanash.
I think Annie will likely speak to this.
Thank you to the committee through the chair. This report is to provide an update on the Area C OCP review project as we're continuing work on phase 2, being the community engagement phase. This month, we're continuing to work on a mail-out engagement workbook for Outer Island and remote residents, which will likely have similar content and questions to those that were just completed in person at the Quadra open houses. So we held 2 OCP open houses at the Quadra Community Center on November 19th and November 26th to start getting into some of the key topic areas, engage the community's level of interest on certain topics. It was a good turnout, and thank you to all those who came and participated. Lastly, we're continuing to prepare for and finalize dates for the next community engagement sessions to further explore those topics that were introduced at the open house. So a full meeting schedule will hopefully be available on the project webpage very soon. Thank you.
Anything from directors? Director Wayne?
Thank you, Chair. And I wanted to say thank you to staff for the great open houses. There was a lot of information and even mini cupcakes, or were they muffins? I wasn't sure. But so thank you very much. And it was really great to see so many folks that came out to the 2 open house sessions and sharing their thoughts. And it seemed from what I noticed that there was a number of red dots that look like a fairly strong endorsement of many current OCP policies. I do have a couple of requests. One of them is that there could be for consideration, more analog options for sharing the news of upcoming meetings be included in the planning process. I noticed that there weren't any posters on any of the bulletin boards. And for someone that isn't on social media, wasn't necessarily a lot of ways for them to find out about the open houses. And I'm really happy to hear that you're working on a schedule. I did have a question about that. Is the schedule going to sort of be like a comprehensive, like these are the topics and these are the meetings, or is it going to be like a one at a time sort of announcement? I'm hoping that it'll be a more like a comprehensive schedule for the next few months. So people can get them into their calendars and save.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, as I think we've said this already, but the intent is that we have a series of engagement opportunities, and so we'll be posting them as a series.
Right.
And so people will know in advance when certain topics will be discussed. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. And I was wondering if it would be possible to have I was just looking at the SRD webpage and sort of trying to think like a community member, and on the SRD website, it has like a communities page. And when you go to the communities, you can select Area C, but under there's no link to go to the official community plan page. And it would be really great if there was somehow a linkage, because it's for the average person. They may not know that they need to go under services and then under planning to find a link to the OCP page.
Thank you through the chair. We can certainly raise that with communications who manages our website. The SRD communities page is intended as an overview of those communities rather than as a site for happenings in those communities, but that would be a question for communications. But we can
Okay.
certainly raise that with them.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. And I just have one final question. One thing that I noticed, which sparked community conversation at following the open houses, was that on the housing presentation board, it stated that Area C or Quadra Island needed over 600 homes in the next 20 years. And I know that that number originated through a provincially mandated use of an algorithm that they created, and it was based in part on regional growth numbers, which regional growth rate, which we know in rural areas is slower. And when we received that information at this table, we recommended explanation of that being added to the housing needs assessment report. And I'm just wondering if there's a way for planning to share the context of how that number was created with the community.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Anything further? Director Vinesh?
Yeah, I just had a question about the workbook that's circulating to outer residents. I'm just curious what that is. Is that like a survey that sort of allows people to provide input and then they hand it back into the SRD, or how does that work?
Through the chair, the workbook is still in production, so it hasn't been distributed yet. But yes, it is intended to reach outer island residents who are not otherwise able to attend in-person meetings or even have adequate internet access to attend a virtual meeting.
Okay, so they like fill it out and then hand it back in.
Correct.
Great.
I'll call a question on receipt. All those in favor? That's unanimous and carried. Number 2, Oyster River Electoral Coastline Floodplain Risk Assessment Mapping Project for receipt.
Move
receipt.
Second.
Thank you.
And I believe we have a delegation for this, or speaker. Am I correct?
That is correct. Clayton Hiles is here to present that.
Should I go ahead here?
Yeah, all yours.
All right. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Clayton Hiles. I'm a professional engineer. I was the coastal engineer of record for this project. Yeah, and I'm going to take you through a little bit of what we did and the results from the floodplain mapping project. Next slide. So I think you know the study area, it's electoral area D, but we are focusing specifically on the coastline for coastal flooding and also flooding of the Oyster River. So there's potential for creek flooding within electoral area D as well, but that was not covered by this project. We're focusing specifically on the coastline and on the river. Next slide. So there was a number of goals associated with this project. We're looking to create mapping and hazard assessment and risk assessment, which informs land use planning and development decisions, preparing and updating emergency response plans, and assessing flood risks to people and other community values and assets. So to do this work, we examined a number of different flooding scenarios. So obviously we have flooding of the Oyster River and flooding of the coastline. Those things may happen under different conditions at different times, or under an extreme scenario, you may get flooding of the coastline and the river occurring at the same time. So you can see in each of those boxes, we have different percentages, and that's the percent probability of each of those storms happening in a year. So that 0.5 event that's highlighted, that means that there's a 1 in 200 chance of that event being exceeded in each year. So that's a fairly extreme event. We also have the 1% exceedance probability event. That's associated with a 1 in 100 chance of that storm happening in a particular year. Also a 5%. So that's a fairly common storm that would be expected once every 20 years. We also looked at, sorry, not yet. Thank you. two different sea level rise scenarios. So this helps us plan for current conditions, but also for future conditions. So that 1 meter of sea level rise that we looked at, that's nominally representative of the year 2100. We also, for the Oyster River, we looked at two different breaching scenarios for the Glenmore Dike. And this is typical practice because under unbreached conditions, the flood may be slightly different inside the river than under breached conditions. And of course, with breaching, more buildings, more area is going to be exposed to flooding. So it is that orange highlighted 200-year event that is typically used as the basis for land use planning regulation. The other events that we have in here are more for risk assessment so that we can see how the consequences change with different probability events and also with sea level rise. Go ahead. So there were a number of deliverables that came out of this work, regulatory style floodplain maps. And I say style because they are not regulatory maps until they are adopted in a bylaw. Again, they're based on this 200-year event, and they include the effects of sea level rise on freeboard. And these are fairly simple maps. They're meant to be able to be understood by a general audience, so we keep them as uncluttered as possible. The flood risk maps are a little bit different, a little bit more complicated. They show a range of flooding events, right from that probable event with current sea level conditions to the extreme event with future sea level conditions. So those multiple events are overlaid on the map along with different kinds of infrastructure and building prints to illustrate what gets wet in the event of a flooding event. And these are more intended to be used by a range of planning, risk, and emergency management professionals rather than the general public. The flood risk assessment is a companion to the risk maps, and it quantitatively summarizes the infrastructure that's inundated under these various flood scenarios. So this helps us see with numbers how that flood risk is changing as we go from one scenario to the next. Next slide, please. So this is a regulatory style floodplain map for the Oyster River. This is just one snapshot. I think there's 20 some odd different maps as part of this map book. This is just one snapshot, and I've selected it because the Glenmore Dike goes through the middle. So just to start, you can see that the yellow area is the area flooded under that 200-year condition. We've got contour lines that are indicating the elevation of that flooding. We've also got the building footprints and property lines in there to help orient us. But what I want to point out with this map is that it illustrates both the breached and unbreached dike conditions. So on the land side of that dike, the flooding that you see is a breached flooding condition that allows the water to flow out into the Oyster Bay community there. Inside of the dike, on the river side of the dike, that is the unbreached flood condition. So if the dike is not breached, it means all of that water is contained within the river, and it means that the flood levels are actually slightly higher. So that's why if you look at these contours really carefully, they don't line up. There's a discontinuity along the dike. Next slide. So this is a regulatory style floodplain map for the coast. It's very similar. The major difference you see here is that we have coastal zone boundaries. So that's those red lines. And that is because of the effect that waves have on coastal flooding. The wave run-up is sensitive to both the wave exposure, so the waves coming onto the shoreline, but also the geometry of the shoreline. And calculating that run-up is a fairly there's a lot of effort in that calculation. So we can't do it continuously along the coastlines. The way that we handle this is we break the coastline up into sections, and we evaluate that wave run-up component conservatively for that particular section. And it means that within that section of coastline, the flooding is to a constant elevation, and it's conservative based on that particular section of coastline. But if you go to the next section of coastline, there might be slight discontinuities. I will highlight that we try to orient these zone boundaries along features such as roads or property lines so we don't get weird things happening like flood levels changing in the middle of a property or something like that. Next slide, please. So this is a risk map, the same section of river we were looking at before. Now, instead of having one flood scenario, we have 6 illustrated here. The lightest blue colors indicate the most probable common flood in our scenario mix. As you get darker and darker, that incremental dark color indicates the incremental flooding that would happen with a more extreme event. So you can see at the north end of the map here, we have some darker colors associated with that scenario 6. Next slide. Similar for the coast. Again, the lighter colors indicate the more common probable flooding events. As you get to that darker color, those are the more extreme events. So you can see for this particular section, once we get to that most extreme scenario 6, then we have fairly extensive flooding of the backshore. Next slide. So this is a lot of numbers here. This is just taken from the report, but this is a snapshot of the risk assessment. We've got various lines here for land, roads, buildings, pipelines, hydro lines. There's actually a bunch more things we assessed, but I'm just going to focus in on the building count to kind of illustrate the scenarios here. So advance. Thank you. So scenario 1, this is a fairly common storm with current sea level rise conditions. Under these conditions, we have about 475 buildings flooded. This is largely in the coastal areas. Advance. Again, I guess. So scenarios 2 and 3 are more extreme storms. And in these conditions, the Glenmore Dike is breached. So we can see that going from that unbreached condition in scenario number 1 to the breach condition in scenario number 2, we almost double the number of buildings that are inundated. But this is, again, still at current sea levels. Advance again. So number 4 is, again, a fairly common storm, but with future sea level rise conditions. So we can see quite a bit more buildings inundated under this scenario, and it's really the coastal flooding that's this incremental number of buildings that's inundated with this situation. Advance again. So scenarios 4 and 5, these are more extreme storms. They include sea level rise. With these storms, the Glenmore Dike is breached, and we have 1,300 or 1,400 buildings inundated under this scenario. So again, there's all sorts of other infrastructure that's summarized under this risk assessment. So if you want to get into it, it's there. I just thought I'd illustrate it with the building count. Advance again, please. So just getting to the end here, the summer flooding based on our work. The flooding along the Oyster River is fairly limited unless the Glenmore Dike is breached. If the Glenmore Dike is breached, then the entirety of the Oyster Bay community is affected by flooding, and there's a significant increase in the number of buildings which are inundated. In many of the scenarios, there's extensive flooding of the agricultural lands at the mouth of the Oyster River, extending north to Iron River Road. I don't expect that's a surprise to anyone. From Iron River Road up to Linwood or the Story Creek area, the flooding is mostly limited to the lands immediately adjacent to the coast. So that means on the ocean side of Highway 19A. Going from Story Creek up to Shelter Point, there's more extensive flooding in this area. We have both sides of Highway 19A inundated. But going from Shelter Point up to the northern border with Campbell River, the flooding is again contained to the lands immediately adjacent to the coast, so on the ocean side of Highway 19. And just to reiterate, as we go from these common flooding scenarios with no sea level rise to these low probability, really uncommon flooding scenarios with sea level rise, there's a really significant increase in the risk associated with flooding. Advance. That's it for me. I'm happy to take questions if that's part of the process here.
Dr. Rice?
Thank you, Chair. The one question I had is that when I was looking at the report, I didn't see that last slide, the summary of flooding. Is there any possibility that we can get a copy of that? So I didn't see it in the actual report itself.
It is in the report. I believe it's section 6.
Okay. Because I was looking at
it's more
section,
verbose.
I was looking at section 7.1 of the summary and I didn't see it in there. So maybe I need to look back a little bit. Again, I think quite telling, one thing that is kind of interesting with our coastline is wintertime we get hit with those southeasterlies and yes, they can do a fair amount of damage and we've seen that already. Question for staff, is any of this information going to be shared with the Comox Valley?
Through the chair, yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
So I have a curious question then, Dr. Vinesh. When you're considering coastal flooding and doing the calculation on that, is it a mean tide calculation you do, or is it a high tide, winter tide?
It combines a high tide, so a spring winter tide, with a storm surge condition. So that's, it's a high tide combined with even higher water levels due to pressure effects associated with the storm.
Thank you. Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. Fascinating report. I'm wondering, the 20-year scenario, when was the last 20-year scenario? When did that happen? It's my first question. And then secondly, now that we have this information, what do you feel is our responsibility as far as, our next steps?
I don't have an answer for when the last 20-year storm occurred. If I'm remembering correctly, the atmospheric river event that happened in 21 was something close to that, a 10 or 20-year event. It is in the report. I just don't have it off the top of my head as I'm not the river engineer, I'm the coastal engineer. But the next steps here are to consider how to integrate this information into land use planning and emergency response. And those are kind of two different processes. With land use planning, as your staff, I'm sure, are aware, we're aiming to keep people from building within the flooding areas, and there's various mechanisms and approaches for taking that. And I do believe that the approaches that are most appropriate vary from community to community. So to just rattle off how to do that, I'm not sure I can do off the top of my head right now, but the most common way of handling these things is to implement flood management areas or floodplain areas within bylaws, and then require specifics around building, construction, and subdivision within those floodplain areas. In terms of emergency management, I'm sure your staff have a handle on this, but to try and integrate this information into how response to a large storm might occur, particularly looking at transportation routes. If there's flooding that cuts off part of the community from the rest of from emergency services, especially, we need to take a hard look at how that is handled.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any, the 20-year scenario that I think it was 475 buildings, do we have a responsibility to let them know that, hey, we've done this study and, sometime in the next 20 years, this is the likely scenario? Do we have Yeah, I'm just wondering from like a risk management perspective for the SRD, now that we have this information, we know this, is a likely scenario sometime in the next couple decades. What is our responsibility as far as letting those folks know that are in the riskier places?
That's a question directed at me?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I'm not an area, this is getting a bit outside of my subject expertise, but just releasing the report is a first step to letting people know. However, I will caution just releasing the report can cause problems of its own at times, especially when we're looking at some of the more extreme scenarios and people's reactions to seeing their entire community underwater. So, um, my personal view on this is that yes, people should be given the information so that they can take action on it. But some thought probably needs to go into that process. And if I'm being honest, when we've gone through this process with others, usually the municipality has lawyers involved uh, to manage their risk and liability through this process.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Curious, Director Rice has any comments or any action you want to take based on this information?
Thank you, Chair. To address Director Vinesh, Area D has been taking steps for a long time to deal with this. This is not something that is new or unknown. We're in the process right now of taking a look at the two services that are quite critical to maintaining the Oyster River and the dike, and we're making changes to that. There was a study done, and engineering can speak more to it, but we do have a plan going forward. As staff already confirmed, they're going to be sharing this information with the Comox Valley Regional District to assist with their planning. When I take a look at Area D in terms of planning, we're not building right near the Oyster River. I think there's only been 2 development applications that have been approved for Glenmore Road. We are developing more in the Oyster Bay lands, and I'm looking at stormwater management and what can we do with that. So Area D's already taken a fair amount of steps already. And again, if these things take time, but it's going to take time for us to get a handle on what do we do with stormwater. Some of the bigger development applications like the First Nations Village, they have already done a fair amount of work on their own to deal with stormwater management. They have retention ponds because, a fair amount of trees have been removed. So they're doing quite a bit of work in Area D to mitigate any runoff to our creeks and all of those things. But this is a much bigger topic, and certainly Area D's been looking at it. Thank you.
See, all those in favor? It's unanimous and carried. Number 3, service contract for Quadra Island Community Center for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
I suppose I can speak to a little this, Mr. Chair. So we've been working with the Quadra Island Community Center, I would say their leadership group, looking at revising and I suppose changing the terms from a contract to service agreement or service agreement to contract, lease agreement. The reason for doing that, one is the agreement expired, and the second is under the new terms we can provide or believe we can provide or have ability to provide greater liability insurance enhanced programs. So it just I think creates a greater economy to what we are doing and providing for insurance and the programs that the community center is providing. So that's that. To us, it's kind of more like a title change. There's nothing dramatically affected in the contents of the agreement. We've worked long and hard with the leadership group from the QIRS, and I think I would personally say I think what you see here is a product of probably 99% agreement between the two parties. And I would say the 1% wouldn't be, deal breaker material in there. You're never going to get full agreement on the wording of everything on there. But I think what you have here is the product of the two groups getting together. It's a 5-year agreement, which was requested by the group. And happy to answer any questions. But again, this is a product of the SRD working with the QRS leadership group, and this is what we have.
Director Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to our CAO, Mr. Leach, for working with the Rec Society Board to create this contract, which I believe more closely aligns with the needs of the Quadra Island Recreation Society. And they do such amazing work running the Quadra Community Center. So I really appreciate the time and effort that you and planning staff have put into it. So thank you. I have 4 questions and comments. So, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if it's preferable if I ask them all at once or individually. Mr. CAO, do you have an opinion on that?
One at a time.
One at a time, okay. So my first question is, I'm just curious why in this contract from the previous one, they're now being called a contractor versus a society. To my mind, this word society is a little more relational and indicates who they really are, but now they're being just called a contractor.
Again, my perspective on that is to enable us to provide greater insurance coverage and program coverage to it. So unless somebody else has a different opinion.
The only thing I would add is that that's just because we're entering into a contract. It's a legal representation of the relationship. That's all.
Okay, thank you. And there was an item Q on page 3 of the agreement, which seemed a little confusing to me. It says that the contractor needs to submit to the regional district by the first day of April and October a copy of inspection records and any decisions of the board of directors regarding the development and maintenance of the community center from the previous 3 months. And I just feel like then we're missing 6 months a year without submissions, or and I just noticed that the previous contract, or whatever it's called, lease agreement, it had that happening 4 times a year. So I'm not sure if maybe it just needs to say April and October, but then the previous 6 months.
Well, if I may, Mr. Chair, I think both groups, but more QIRS felt that was a little too onerous and frequent. So we settled on what we thought was reasonable. To the twice a year, considering other items that were addressed in the agreement. So taking that line in context with the rest of the contract, both parties figured that was sufficient.
And I totally appreciate that. And my question was more just that when you ask an organization to submit records twice a year, but that they're only for things that happened in the previous 3 months, that there is a window that's being left potentially open to not having those. I just wonder if the word should be, say, from the previous 6 months.
All I can say is that's what we both thought was reasonable. I mean, if you have reporting a couple times a year, I think that's adequate.
Okay, well, if it's not of a concern to you, then that's fine. I just thought it was a bit strange. So, and then I was curious about termination clause 24. It seems a little heavy-handed, allowing the regional district to terminate at its sole option without notice if there isn't complete satisfaction on the part of the regional district. And I was wondering if it could mention like mediation before termination without notice.
Well, you've hit on that 1% part that I said we weren't completely in alignment with. At one point, I believe we had a concession that from the group that, look, that language comes from the lawyers. It's representative of other language. It's in other contracts. I can't come to the board with legal representations of a contract and say, let's take what the lawyers said and let's heavily reduce that as the contract holder. So there was a point where they said, okay, fine. And then at the 11th hour, again, the group representative, they felt it was heavy-handed. And, you know, my answer to them is, hey, look, this is an agreement for the board with language that's supplied by a lawyer that's common in other contracts and agreements. And, you know, I wouldn't take it too personally. It's, you know, some language from lawyers can seem harsh, but like, look, that's what's coming from the lawyer, and that's, you know, really what I think we have a responsibility to provide to the board, because this is a contract that first and foremost that we look to insulate the board from. So I don't think anyone should focus on that language too much.
I just make one little comment that I manage a lot of contracts in my career, and they're all written by lawyers, and every one of them said, company has all the rights, contractor has no rights. That's just the way it is.
Okay, thank you. My final question was just that the report says that as a service provider rather than as a tenant, the Quadra Recreation Society may be eligible for coverage under the insurance plan as an associate member. And I'm wondering if it would be beneficial to have a follow-up motion following these motions here, asking that we can have a report on that at some point. Is that? Your
Sure.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, we can have a follow-up report. I thought you were going to go somewhere else. We've written this because we still don't have clarity from municipal insurance in terms of it. So we wrote the insurance aspect of it as a worst case scenario, because municipal insurance wanted to see the signed agreement before they made determinations on that. So both groups understood that we would continue with some more of the current language under a worst case scenario. And hopefully once it's signed, we can provide some additional relief through coverage through MIA. And if you want to make a motion about that, that's fine. And if we're successful or not, we can bring that back. But our intent is to create some efficiencies financially with insurance, right? It's like the SRD, ultimately, the residents of Quadra are going to pay for any and all insurance, no matter where it comes from. So if we can create more coverage under municipal insurance, that will just free money up for other things in there. So it's certainly our intent and our hope to do that. The language here kind of represents not being able to do that, which is status quo. But that's not, but we're going to pursue something.
Thank you through the chair. If I just may add to that, a motion likely isn't necessary, as to become an associate member, it wouldn't necessarily come before the board again. So this would come before the board before we could enter into that type of insurance relationship with QRS.
Okay, I'm just really curious because I don't know if you recall, but like, I think shortly after I got here, it was one of the first things I asked was how can we extend insurance to nonprofits that will help everybody. So I am quite curious to see that moves forward. And if you don't think that we need a motion, but I would really love to get a report back at your, once you have any information on it.
We are actively pursuing that. So it at this point, I would expect that it would come forward to the board regardless.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So those are all my questions, Chair.
Thank you. Anything further from directors?
Just one comment from myself is really appreciate the QRS group coming in and, you know, working through this. There was things that they wanted, which was great. And I think we came to a good concession, for lack of a better word. And it was, you know, really appreciate their efforts and contributions.
Call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Motion, Director Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. I will move that the committee recommend that bylaw number 401, being Blanken Memorial Park Property Lease and Service Agreement Authorization bylaw 2020, be repealed.
Second.
Thank you, Director Manesh. Anything from directors? Call the question. All those in favor? That's unanimous. Carried. Director Mooney.
Thank you, Chair. I will move that the committee recommend that the chair and corporate officer be authorized to execute a contract with the Quadra Island Recreation Society for the operation of recreation services at the Quadra Island Community Center and maintenance of the community center building and grounds.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Carried. Who was the seconder there? Director Vinesh, were you seconder on that? Number 4, electoral area financial assistant grant and aid service for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Director Rice.
Unless Tom has something, nothing from staff other than, happy to take input, from the committee.
You guys there, Tom? Or?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think what you have before you is basically a composite of all of the direction we've been given as staff in terms of this initiative. So if there's other things that the committee would like to consider before sending this off to the board, then I think you have an opportunity to do that. Otherwise, it's there for your consideration as presented.
Director Winning?
Thank you, Chair. When I looked at this report and I went back to the October 3rd report, I noticed that in that report, there had been a number of questions posed. And I think a couple of them we haven't necessarily addressed yet. One of them was service withdrawal, and the other one is approval of the electors. So I would just pose this to the electoral area directors here, as the question was, are there any special considerations that would need to be included in the bylaw with respect to service withdrawal? Perhaps we would want to include a line that indicates that it's considered for service review every year, so
Yeah,
that
we could have an
there,
internal service review. I think
Yeah.
that's what we'd want. Could take 10 seconds.
I'm not totally sure what the language would be, but I felt like we should probably include that because it was posed earlier.
Would we need a motion for that, staff? Or can we just include it?
Mr. Chairman, if you're talking about an informal service review whereby the service gets discussed at this committee or board
Yes.
without other parties, without
Yes.
third parties, then you can do that at any time. If you're
Okay.
talking about something where any participating area has the right to force a process of review that the others do not want to undertake, then I think you have to write that into the bylaw.
Is that a statutory service review you're talking about there?
Yes,
But doesn't any participant have the right to do that with the province anyway?
after 5 years, I believe, yeah.
Oh, after 5 years, I see.
Maybe another possible alternative would be that, let's say if you wanted to do a service review and somebody wanted to pull out of the service, I'm assuming they could, let's say, budget $0 for that. That might be a workaround, do you think?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think unless you put that into the bylaw as a provision, I don't think that could be forced on the remaining participants.
No, not forced, but as we get together, we do financial planning for the electorals. This presumably would be a service and it would have to be populated by money. And there's gonna be contributions from, let's say, all the participants, and then split in a certain way. A participant could just opt to, I'm not saying forced, but I mean, I don't think we have to talk about being forcing people in or not, but a participant, I'm assuming, could offer zero money up for that year.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that would be permitted without the concurrence of the other parties. In other words, that the funding formula is in the service bylaw. And I think because we don't raise the funds ourselves, the province raises them for us, they would go by the formula in the bylaw as opposed to some side agreement for a particular year.
Yeah,
Maybe I
and
misunderstand the
I'm going to
question.
exclude the word forced, so pretend that we're not forcing people to do anything, but we would still have to populate the number every year, right? And so, again, excluding the word forced because we're not going to get to that point. If, let's say, one of the areas didn't want to participate, I'm confident the group would say, let's reduce that number in the budget, therefore eliminating them from the benefit.
Right, and that could happen, but that would mean a bylaw amendment.
Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah.
Right, and then with consent of the other 3 directors, 1 director could ask to be excused from the service, right?
Yes, the board could make as many amendments to the service as are needed. Yes, absolutely.
Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. So just to be clear, if we want to change these percentages 2 years from now, we would have to amend the bylaws to do that. That's a reasonably simple process. Yeah, okay. I did have another question though, but I'm blanking on it. I'll pause.
The AAP suggested was.
Yeah, question about the approval process. You know, I assume we have to go to AAP or referendum on this. We can't, because we already have a grant and aid, we can't be like, you know, this is a non-controversial thing. We can just sign for it.
I believe that municipal affairs will require the approval of the electors. Because you're establishing a new service. It's already covered under statute, so this is different. Whether they will even allow this is anybody's guess, but I believe they will require elector approval if this is going to go ahead. Yes.
Thank you.
Director Mahoney?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a further question about the percentage method as laid out in this draft bylaw here. It extrapolates, 40% would it, the 30,000 of for the Area C grant and aid budget. However, the amount that Area C requests, organizations request changes every year. And in 2025, so to date, I believe we've only distributed $7,000. So, I feel like the number is going to fluctuate each year based on the need of the previous year. And I'm just wondering if staff could speak to if there's an algorithm or some sort of back end, function that would be able to track that from year to year.
If I may, Mr. Chair, there's going to have to be a process called working together. So we currently have that one where we contribute an amount to unequally, and then, maybe this is sexist, a gentleman's agreement on how it's been withdrawn, or you hit a limit, and if you go above that limit, you bring it to the group. There's only 4 of you. I would say it can get overly complicated that way. It's easy to do the accounting for who contributed what and who withdrawed what. And I would humbly suggest when we get to those at financial planning, we bring that forward and say, you contributed this, you used that, you did this, you did that. How do we say that's the simplest way? Otherwise, it's just going to get consume way too much time. We're going to spend $1 to save a penny kind of deal, right? And in time and that. So I would say, and if you can't agree amongst yourselves on that, then, that's your own problem, right?
I have a suggestion here. We're not going to rescind the grant and aid service we already have, correct? So in that case, for Director Mahoney, just make your percent into our joint service, whatever you're guaranteed you're going to spend every year, make it 7,000 if you want. And then the rest put in your other grant and aid service, and it's going to be as flexible as you want. It's a single participant service. You can do what you want with it.
I'm confident we'll be able, amongst the group, to sort out any inequities. I'm confident of that. We've done it in the past fairly successfully with the contribution that we have right now.
That's right. It would be really efficient for the joint service if everybody would intend to spend what they put in. Then from year to year, we wouldn't have to change it. Anything else you want to vary, just put it in your regular grant and aid single participant service. We're done.
Okay, so on that point, I guess my question would be, perhaps the percentages, like for Area C should be varied. Maybe it should be more equal. Like maybe it should be like 30, 30, 10, or if that math works, or something, so that then if we want more in our individual services, we can, but there's also a base amount that we will be using and be sure to use up every year.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Because right now, I think, Director Rice's point previously was that he was planning on decreasing the amount that as an area they were investing in grants and aid. So that percentage is quite a bit lower in the apportionment of cost section of the bylaw. So to the other directors, does it make sense that we would maybe reconsider those numbers if I say that, I think Area C should be 30% because the balance, and then we can have a lower number. I'm just looking for some feedback from you guys.
Do you still have access to that spreadsheet?
It's in the report.
Yeah, but I mean to modify it. Because Robin could stick in whatever number she wants and we can finalize it right now. So I think the rest of us
Yeah, I
are
think this
happy.
is what we've agreed
Yeah,
on.
I think we could spend a whole lot of time massaging the numbers and, you know, we have to have a bylaw, and we have to put numbers and formulas in there, but it's really gonna get down to financial planning, which is not gonna be complicated. You wanna put this much money in, I agree with you, be conservative, and then anything over and above, you've got your own grants and aid. Let's not forget, any money doesn't get spent, gets carried over, so I personally wouldn't split hairs over this. We can do what we want internally as long as we have a bylaw and we have ways to collect funds.
Right. But if Robin's got 30 in there now and she wants it 10, now maybe it'd be the time to make it 10, or maybe we got till the budget is finalized. When's this coming back to the board?
Well, the bylaw won't get approved before the financial plan, though,
Okay,
right?
well,
Because this will have to go to municipal affairs and then it has to go for approval and so on and so
So
forth.
she can let staff know and put in whatever number she wants, the percentage automatically shifts, it doesn't affect the rest of us.
If I say 30%, someone has to
Well,
take
don't do
10.
percent, do a cash amount, say you
Yeah.
want in 10,000.
Oh, I
It will
see.
automatically calculate the percent, and it won't affect the rest of us.
Okay.
We're still putting the amounts we put in.
At the end of the day, we'll direct the province to collect whatever money we want, no matter what the percentages are. You four will say, hey, we collectively want it 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand, whatever that is, right?
Right, but we're gonna requisition by percent.
Yeah,
That's the thing.
yeah. That, all I'm saying is, yeah, you requisition by percent, but then you'll know what you've contributed.
Yeah.
It'll be easy to figure out what we withdraw and then consolidate that.
No, it'll work fine when Robin figures out the number she wants in there. All right. So we're on receipt now. Just one moment here till I get rid of this stuff on my screen. There we go. So I'll call the question on receipt then. If there's anything further, Director Vaness, you got a comment there?
No, it's been addressed, thanks.
Director Rice, nothing. All right, on receipt then, all those in favor? That is carried. Now, do we need a motion to go ahead, or is this automatic?
Yeah, I'll move option B. I'll recommend that the board, I move option B, recommend that the board proceed with the establishment of electoral area grant and aid service based on the current version of the proposed service bylaw.
Second.
Two. Any discussion? All those in favor? That is unanimous, and that's carried. Thank you. Revive draft 2026-2030 financial plan for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Director Vaness.
So while Mike's pulling this up, just a little caveat here before he comes. What you see in here is everything. So I may have tweaked it a little bit in terms of today and Strathcona Gardens and regional services, but I kind of have some methodology behind that. But what you see in here for your electoral areas is everything. It's individual, shared, and regional services. So we're going to go later today to the board, and we have the regional services on there. I've extracted the electoral areas out of that. But what you see in here is an all-in number. And so one of the purposes of this now is we creep towards the end of the year, we get some feedback, we see year ends. We still don't have all year end numbers. We obviously don't have the changes in the assessment data. But as we get closer, we're pretty confident with these numbers, and we give them to you before you go to your one-on-one. So if you see something in here and go, oh my God, that's crazy, that's for, you know, further discussion at one-on-ones and how they can be funded, what you want to, you know, pull in this out. Because when you look at these models here that we have, Cortez Fire is an easy one. There's other ways of funding what you see in here, but we give you like a worst case, which is always requisition, right? So when you see it, it's so you can marinate that in your head, and then when we get to one-on-ones, discuss, do you want this? Can it be funded any other way? So there's ways to shift those things. But what you see in here is all in.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say how pleased I was to see it's the tax requisition per average folio. It's really nice thing to change that for us, because a lot of people in my area have various folios.
I think I lost that argument, or I thought I won it, but apparently I lost it. Yeah.
Excellent. So,
Okay.
directors, how are you? You have something? Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to do a brief presentation here. So the first thing I'd like to point out is, as Dave said, this is the complete budget, but it's not really a budget. It's just a working paper at this point. This doesn't represent a commitment. It's just to facilitate all our upcoming budget discussions. We don't have any 2026 assessment data, so all the tax rates and everything else you see is all based on the prior year assessments. This is actually quite a benefit because we could just focus now on the only variable that's changing is the actual underlying costs. But the new assessment data is a timed release. It's scheduled for January 1. So come next year, you're going to see the actual true impact. But just to make it 100% clear, it's the tax rates and everything you see here just for discussion purposes. I'll also be
However, I will say that we have a long history of coming under what you see. Like we are trying to give you a number that will not be exceeded, like as we move forward. So I think Mike's being too conservative, but if you look at the history of this, we have typically been less than what we've shown. Unless at the one-on-ones you say, as Gerald always does, I want this, I want this, I want this, and then the number climbs, right?
More services better.
The other point I'll bring out is I'll try and be pretty quick today. These directors are going to see a lot of this presentation later on today at the board, and then we're going to be digging deep on the services at the upcoming one-on-ones. So again, people should expect a pretty high level overview here. The goal is just really to introduce the data and kind of focus on the forward shared service. But as Dave says, we'll have a general overview, but we did extrapolate the gardens and everything for discussion of the upcoming meetings. Oop, maybe I'll have to hit the button for me. So we usually start with a quick look at the CPI. Again, here the issue is this is the published CPI for consumers. It's not our CPI, but this is kind of a good baseline for any of the local governments around what to use. But we have a different mix of goods and services that we buy. Also, it's estimate. It shouldn't be called an estimate. It's more of a trend line. I didn't do any analysis, anything. I just took the prior period averages and kind of extrapolated where everything's going. Whether it goes down there or not is mostly getting driven down by energy prices, but we'll see how that goes. The one thing I want to point out with this chart is that it does not show falling prices. It shows prices going up at a slower rate. So there's a big difference with that. But I just want to make sure that this is no one expects any falling prices here in Canada. So the next one. So again, we're going to be talking about just the shared services mostly today. And these are, and also base budget. I don't have a slide for it, forgot to put it in, but the base budget is essentially the cost to maintain existing assets and service levels. Anything new, or we also include in that base a limited amount of adjustments for CPI, insurance costs, known costs like tipping and water fee rates. We also look at some of the past volumes for garbage and water and make some assessments there. So you will see a bit of a change, and then we have some surplus and everything else. But anything new and shiny or changes to service levels, we try and introduce that at later stages through business cases or other means. But right now we're kind of focusing on the change for just your existing year over year, just to try and keep it consistent. So I guess that's a good rationale. Again, we're just removing the variable so you can have a look at the change of the service year over year. So some of the upcoming ones, I believe Area A is going to have some business cases related to the fire shared services. Areas B and C, we have the wood chipping service, which will be new to deal with. Area D has a wood chipping or wood debris removal service to address. And then I guess the shared grant and aid service will probably be something for next year. So in this service, so we go back. So just talk about it. The first one is the liquid waste. This is actually, the chart here shows the relative changes. The blues are increases, the oranges are decreases. As far as liquid waste, this is just a reorganization. So we're essentially taking this one shared service between area B and D and splitting it into two individual services. So you're going to see a decrease in the shared service, and then areas B and D will see a directly offsetting increase, but that'll become more clear when we get to the chart. As far as planning and VRL, essentially it's just about a 3.5% inflationary increase. We don't have any numbers from Vancouver Island Library yet, so that's just a guess at this point. And then the big change here is for the electoral area administration. And again, we've kind of sliced it and diced it, so you don't see the offsetting increase in general admin. But just to explain this, during last year's budget, the board had approved a change to the way we distributed the corporate overhead charges. A formal written policy wasn't delivered to the board until June 2025. And as part of that policy, we also look at the regional costs that were in EA admin and Muni admin and decided to reallocate those to general admin just so you get a true sharing of regional costs. So the effects of the actual administration overhead policy were all reflected in the 2025 data. The changes you're going to see on the upcoming slides just reflect costs coming from essentially the EA admin into general admin, and then they kind of offset each other. But essentially it nets out to a less than 2.7% charge for everything else.
So I just want to jump in and I'll explain part of the theory about, this is a good slide for it. The allocation, as you know, can be complicated, and I don't think everyone understands fully the domino effect, and it's not linear. So we changed the allocation policy. Nothing in that changes. We did it in the budget. You know what it was. And then we had a policy that reflects it. In the policy, it said, okay, look at things in Muni admin and EA admin, and those things that are regionally, put them into general admin, so they're shared regionally. What that has for the electoral areas is a different effect than the municipalities. So there is a monetary gain, if you will. So when you see the decrease there through EA on electoral area, I can't read what that is, $25. That's a decrease, and the increase to general admin is 14. So you've got a net benefit to that. So that's just a product of the policy, and this is a one-time thing. It won't happen again. You'll see these numbers as neutral next year. But the municipalities in doing that had a net neutral effect. So from my perspective, dissecting the EAs out, I don't want somebody thinking, let's say from a municipality, oh boy, the allocation is switched and the electoral areas are getting money back and we're neutral. It's more complicated than that. And so as I'm separating this out and saying each of the electoral areas, their net between general admin and electoral area admin is going down this year. So I think, I don't know, my math here is $11 or $12, let's say, for area A, and the rest are more. And I just don't want somebody from Muni going, oh, geez, the Muni is neutral, therefore the benefit is going the wrong way, because it's not linear that way. So that's why I've dissected those twos out, but you see a net financial gain for all four electoral areas. It doesn't change the policy. It's just extracting what the policy said. And for this year, it shows a net gain to, and when I say gain, positive decrease in between electoral area admin and general government admin. And when you'll see it at the board, it'll be neutral to municipalities. And I don't want anyone misinterpreting what that means.
Okay, and speaking of misinterpretation, we're going to go through the next 4 slides here. I've annotated some of these, so I took a lot of the, I don't want to call them boring services out, but they're quite standard. There's no house numbering. I tried to make it fit on the screen just so we didn't have to squint as much to look at it, but all 4 of the next coming slides have some services removed. So the full complete amounts in your book. It's just the, if these TVs were twisted the other way, it might work a little bit better for this slide, but so this is areas A. Again, the top service 247 is Duncan Bay Fire. That only affects a very small portion of the overall area, so we haven't included in the totals. I've kind of pushed it up into the top, but we didn't have any requisition last year, so that amount just reflects the upcoming requisition. So the other error I actually have is my charts aren't really designed for negative requisitions. That's a pretty unique thing. So the 120 grant and aid, that entire amount should be blue. We had a negative amount last year, and this amount is just correcting. But overall, I think it's about $1,600 a year to support your $3,500 grant aid budget. And then there's no reserves or anything for any of the grants and aid services. Next one to talk about is 151, which is the Area A feasibility studies. So in the prior years, we had quite a few studies going through, but then we were able to switch some of the funding over to grants, which again created another refund last year. So that bar should be blue. So we have quite a bit of surplus there because we were able to get some grants and everything else. So on each of the EAs, we've never had reserves for any of the feasibility studies. So I have that set up and everyone's free to use them, but it should reduce some of the erratic tax increases and decreases we see each year because studies are pretty infrequent and they're sometimes can be pretty expensive. So I thought it was a good idea to start employing a reserve to smooth some of that out, but we could talk about that during the single participant meetings. The other point I'll bring is VRL. We've seen some pretty big, Vancouver Island Library. We've seen some fairly significant swings in the past couple of years. We don't have any guidance, so the numbers you're going to see for all the services are just an estimate. And I guess the last one to speak to, I won't bring up it's the same story all the way out through for the administration functions. The last one is for Sayward Volunteer Fire Department. Again, you'll have some upcoming business case for this, but right now we just have a 3% increase built in. This next slide is, this will be for Area B. Sorry, once again, it is annotated, so some of the services are not out. First one I'd like to talk about is the 341 liquid waste. Again, here, you're going to see both services. I tried to put them side by side on each. So you have the 341 and 340, if you could make that out. But you'll notice one has a $8.93 positive requisition. The other one has an $8.93 negative requisition. So it's just splitting the cost. And you'll see the exact same setup when we get to Area D. For the next one would be the what is it, 251 and 250, the two fire services. Essentially here we have CPI, but last year we had some reserve transfers smoothing the smoothing requisition. So that's not built in this year, but when we get to the one-on-ones, we'll have to look at the reserve balances and everything else to see there. So there's probably some flexibility coming in those areas. For 274 garbage. We're going to update that now. This is just a 2% increase, but garbage is really subjective to the different volumes you get. It all depends on pickup. So again, right now the budget is just kind of plugged to show a 2% increase to account for tipping fees or with the volume. And then we have the other one would be 682 for the community halls. Again, we'll probably address that at the upcoming one-on-one. And again, for the next few slides, the wood chipping service is not included.
So just for your information, if you don't know, so if you take like Cortez Island Community Halls and Fire, we just received their requests and budgets and put them in here so we can discuss what those are, different ways of funding it, if there's reserves, so on and so forth. So, but what you see here is just a representation of what they've given us. And then we represent it as just being funded by requisition, but a lot of that can change.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do have questions about certainly the fire. My understanding is that they put in a very small increase, but we'll discuss that tomorrow. Thanks.
Next slide. So this is for Area C. So I guess the first one to talk to again is the feasibility study, and there's a similar story to Area A where we had tax in the prior years to carry out some studies. Then we had growing communities funds come in, and plus we had some budgets completing under budget. So this year I just have the requisition pinned at 0 for discussion purposes, and then the surplus I've moved that to the new reserve. It's a pretty significant reserve contribution, so you essentially have your next studies kind of mostly funded, or you could look to reduce that. But again, we'll discuss that at the upcoming one-on-ones. For function 127 grant and aid, again, we're just maintaining a $35,000 overall budget there, but your spend was $7,100 or something so far. So the requisition in the budget's just to replace the actual spend. For 555 economic development was another sizable one. Again, that's just replacing the spend. When I say sizable, it's all relative. There's just not too many increases to discuss here. 618 Parks is really affected by wharves this year, so we have a lot more work in the wharf service, and so that's kind of creating some, a bit of a downward pressure in parks. But again, we'll talk about that. And then same with 685 for community halls was the other one, but we'll be discussing that tomorrow as well. Go to the next slide. So again, with 640, the big one here is gardens is not included. Again, we'll be talking about that at the later meeting. So much like the Duncan Bay Fire, the Oyster River Bank Protection Service only affects a small amount of homes, so we don't have that included in the total. And the big blue bar there is again, it's just an increase there for the ongoing maintenance. It's about $2,700 total. Again, this Area D was affected by the liquid waste transfer, so you're going to see the in and out through the two different services. For all the shared services, 290 animal control, the transit, the animal control and the fire, we haven't actually have any preliminary data from the city yet, so we just have some estimates there. But as far as the transit, we did get a bit of a increase there for 785. So in transit, we had a deficit to pay for last year, and then they're estimating about a 10% increase this year. So that's going to be a higher relative increase. The other big consideration to talk about is water. We have the water meter project going on. So we've looked at increasing the repairs and maintenance expenses somewhat just to offset the work that's coming from on the capital side. And then to do that, we've employed some reserves to do a bit of smoothing there. So what you're seeing here is about a 6% increase, but I think we're going to have some options going into one-on-ones to, just because the water meters is kind of a one-time project. So we'll look to smooth that out some. And then I guess the last one on the list was the fire. Again, this is just a 3% increase because we don't have the data. So to hold the requisition at a 3% increase, we had to use a reserve. So we have a big reserve contribution this year. So again, when we get to the single participants, we'll look at that and see what the director wants to do. But the new service or potential new service is a pretty big unknown. So I think we have a pretty conservative amount. And then, like Dave says, you have some options here. Next slide. So that's again the beef presentation, and again I'll apologize. You're gonna have to endure a lot of those slides again later today. So I'll try and make those quick as well.
So before I call the question on receipt, whatever you want to discuss, let's discuss it now. And if you're going to have a motion afterwards, let me know that motion's coming up, and we'll do that after we do receipt. So Director Rice, you want to go first?
Thank you, Chair. Just going back and looking at my notes, I believe that the library doesn't have anything too crazy in this budget, but it's definitely not going down. And with regards to 911 services, the forecast for this year and long-term is 4%. And I believe that was 4% all the way to 2029. So gives you an idea there. The biggest thing that's driving it is the 911, the enhanced, so there's a lot of capital investment on software and those kinds of things. So that's what I saw. With regards to my comments, I didn't see the wood chipping service in the preliminary budget. And you might want to make some changes to the write-up on the Campbell River Fire Protection. It's still referring to it as the 1970-something service, and we've just updated that. So thank you.
Yeah. Again, too, if I glossed over too much, we try and just compare the year over year as far as the consistency. So the new wood chipping service or the wood debris removal service and the two wood chipping services, as well as Area Day's business case, is kind of something new for 2026. So yeah, we're looking at doing that. But I'd say the wood chipping service for B and C is shared. So that would be a good topic for conversation. And then we can start addressing at anything new and shiny, and I would say that those services are indeed new and shiny, so not really part of the base, but I'm happy to switch that rationale going forward if everyone likes.
If I can, Mr. Chair, too, there's a few balls in the air you can see with contracted services, let's say with the municipality, and then we share regional services with Comox. So, excuse me, because I watch that stuff and so I can see what's going on in Comox. Looking at Comox's budget, and they're looking at a number of things that they want to increase, let's say. Now that has an effect on us and why we have some unknowns in there. I'll give you one thing I was ranting about to Director Wally before the meeting was that they're looking to implement some asset management with staffing, additional staffing. What they would do with that likely then is push out those costs to the other services, 911, solid waste, et cetera, which bloats these numbers, right? So when you're participating in that, and because I know you're all allocation experts now, you got to lend your mind to that. Just because Comox says they're doing it, they'll spread out these costs to the rest of the groups. The other things with the municipalities when we have service contracts, so the city set their rate at 2.7%. They don't reveal, let's say, like there's a high level of where that money is going to come from. But let's say contract services is part of revenue for that. We don't know if they've got to 2.7 by increasing contract services. We don't know that, right? You know, whether they're doing that through transfers to reserves, whether they're shoving stuff over to user fees. So there's things on there that we don't know, but we can't get yet. But one thing you can, as you participate, I would suggest in solid waste, 911, libraries, a hospital, is that when they're talking about these, those allocations will blow it out to us, and that's how these are reflected in there. So just to keep line of sight on some of those things.
Anything else from directors? Director Vanash?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question on Function 201 Regional Fire Administration. That's page 32 of the report. On the revenue list, it's not showing any tax requisition, and it's showing a deficit of negative 372,000 for this year. Just wondering.
For that one, the board decided to not actually enact a new service. They wanted to put that in as a general administration. So the tax requisition that you see under general administration funds regional fire.
Director Woody?
Thank you, Chair. When I looked at the electoral area administration function, I noticed that the commentary includes a mention of shifts in costs between municipal administration, general admin, and EA admin. And I was wondering if it would be possible to have a more clear definition of the reallocation as a percentage, or for people who are, casually perusing the financial plan, so they would have more understanding of it, or maybe a link to the policy so that if it would make more sense to the average viewer.
A link to the policy for sure is, and I'm trying to be careful in terms of, so what we did in the allocation in 2025, nothing about that changes. But the policy identified, let's say at a high level, it says, look at EA admin and Muni admin and things within those that are regional, take those and put them into general admin where we share on that 70-30 split there. So that realignment we have done. And again, there's some folks that will look at that and say, okay, my math is that electoral area C through that has a $16 lower requisite, a $16 benefit. And that's not changing the allocation. It's just finalizing the principles of the policy. Now, when it comes to the municipalities, the result of that is a net neutral. So we can present that, like, again, give people links to the policy all they want, and all the details are in the budget and the GL account codes in there. So that is what we're seeing as an EA group compared to the municipal group. And I've dissected it out and we'll present it this afternoon to the municipal group as a net neutral in there. And that's understanding the group and the dialogue or the lack of understanding it. I think that is the smoothest way possible as it presents. it's again, it's just exercising the policy, but it doesn't, I don't want anyone thinking there's more allocation to be redistributed, because that's not the case. It's just creating a new function and putting those two things from EA and Muni into that. And it's not a linear equation, but the results of that for one time is that there's a reduction to allocations in the electoral areas, and it's neutral for the municipalities. And my humble suggestion is we continue on that path.
I have one quick comment too. If I was just to normalize for this recategorization and you look at the EA services and everything else, just look at the dollars coming in. Right now you have a 2.69% increase in the administration overall. Because like I say, we're just taking big chunks of money out of the two EA and Muni admin functions, and we're putting that in. We're just not chunks of money. Sorry, we're taking the regional costs, which are chunks of money, I guess. We're taking the regional costs out of those. We're just reallocating them. Small CPI in small CPI increase. But yeah, when you boil it all down, 2.7%.
Well, I would just add that, I'm happy that there isn't a big increase because there was due to the allocations or the reallocations last year. So it's great that it's neutral this year.
So it's decrease for the EAs, it's neutral for the munis.
Right. Okay. Well, it was definitely an increase for Area C last year.
Yeah.
And then my other question is around the Function 500 planning there. And I think we're meant to talk about the shared services here. So there's a significant variance in the sale of service revenues. And I was wondering if staff could provide an update on the staffing vacancy and the Next Gen 911 project, because it seems the variance in sale of service revenues seems to be related to the staffing vacancy and the Next Gen 911, which I don't maybe know quite enough about.
I can speak partially to Next Gen 911. So as everything, it's a little bit complicated in the terms of the province gave the regional district and municipalities each lumps of money and then said you're able to invoice for 50% more than you were given at. And so there is things that we are, I don't know if we consider them revenue or looking to invoice municipalities for in terms of that money. So again, the province gives, I think it's $25,000.
Yeah, the total possible, everyone got 22.5, and I believe you could request more up to $45,000. So we had built our 911 grant in, and then when we undertook it, as far as I understand, maybe Aniko can correct me if I'm wrong here, is that we were able to do a lot of services that will benefit some of the other municipalities. So we took on their work. So we have a big positive increase. So that variance is essentially us billing the other municipalities so we could do some of the related work of the 911 with our staff.
So for example, let's take Zabalis. They're small. They got this 22.5, and they might not have much or any way to spend that, but we can spend it on their behalf. So they got gifted the 22.5, and if they wanted another 22.5, then they would have to invoice us for that, and we would create a number of expenses related to that. So that can have an impact on, I don't know if we're referring to that as revenue or sales of service.
Yeah.
But under 911, that is any discrepancy in terms of us trying to, because we want to maximize the amount of money that we're invoicing for the Next Gen 911. And a lot of that can come from the external municipalities. And they can invoice us for that, and then we can connect revenue for that. Sales of service, yet some of it might have been affected. We have hired a bylaw enforcement officer, and I think they're going to start yesterday. There you go.
And another quick one too. You're going to see more sales of service revenue coming in next year. We've only partially earned it so far, but we're looking at about a net total of 80,000 of external billings for that.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. And thank you for explaining Next Gen 911 to me. I might have to replay this video, gather even more information on that. And then Chair, I do have one motion following receipt.
Okay. Thank you, Director Mooney. I got a couple questions myself. This is a single participant question, but a little preparation for the 15th when I have that meeting. Probably Sean can answer this, but I noticed in function 245, Sayward Volunteer Fire Department, there's a feasibility of installing dry hydrants. I don't know what they are. And the Sayward Valley is being assessed. What are dry hydrants and what's the dream hoping to come true here?
Through the chair to the chair, the dry hydrant is just a way of we would install a pipe on the Sayward Bridge or closely adjacent to it that runs down into a deeper part of the water in the river that's always accessible. So the fire department can just lay hose pipeline.
Okay, got it. Not what I had imagined, but perfect. That's
What,
good. Thank
what
you.
did you imagine?
Okay. Well, I imagined dry hydrants up and down the whole valley. I thought, what? Okay, another thing, is it possible to take some of the corporate overhead allocations that were put in electoral administration that in some small way might relate to planning and move them over to the planning? No change in cost, but just a reallocation. This would be important because, as you know, those municipalities that might consider joining would need to know what the real cost of joining is.
Sure. If there's a motion, we can certainly examine that. I won't answer that yes or no, but we can certainly look at that. Yeah.
Okay, I think Robin will have a motion for that later on. And if by the grace of God, our joint grant need service went ahead, when would be the first requisition? Would it be 27?
Yeah.
Okay, that fixes that. And then my last comment was, I every year get a appendix to the budget, which has all the cost codes and whatever. And I understand that in that, there is a way to determine how much each electoral area is actually paying for each cost code. I wonder if it'd be possible to put a simple little index in there. It's a very difficult document to find stuff in. Is that?
Are you talking about the list of GL accounts?
Yeah, that's the VATM appendix.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a lot of what you ultimately get it when
Yeah,
the budgets conclude. Yeah.
Yes.
So, but not now.
No.
Yeah, you'll get it. What we've developed
Yeah,
is
I
to,
understand. I just talked about possible an index in there because it's
Oh,
a
yeah.
thick little document and it's hard to
yeah,
find.
yeah. And I'm
Is that
sure Mike can
possible?
index it.
Yeah, it's just a question of finding the hours or somebody to do it. But yeah, we could work for that. Yeah, it is in linear order. I just say one thing about that document, just if is looking at it, is we can't change it very much. That's just a direct output from our system, and this is not a flexible system. But yeah, to put some type of index on there definitely makes some logic sense.
Thank you. That's it for me then. So anyone else will call a question on receipt? All those in favor? Can't hear it.
Have a motion to receive.
We have the receipt motion. Didn't we move to receipt?
Move receipt.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. That's carried. And a motion, Director Mooney.
Yeah, thank you. I would move that staff bring back a report to the electoral areas on those electoral area admin overhead allocations that relate to electoral area planning and shifting them to planning for budgeting purposes. That makes sense. Okay.
Second.
Thank you, Director Rice. All those in favor? No one's opposed. That's carried. Thank you. Okay. Down to number 5, preliminary draft. No, number 6, regional district policy review, part 4 for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Director Winnie. Anything there? Director Mooney?
This was
Yeah.
deferred from the board, so I don't have anything.
Director Mooney has a comment first.
Thank you, Chair. And I move to refer this, these policies to our table because they are all parks policies, which affect the electoral areas. And so I have a question to staff is that do we have other parks policies which cover park identification, dedication, operations that include community group involvement, management plans, funding nonprofits, et cetera? Because that's what these cover.
I don't know, likely we have lots of parks policies. Yeah, just like again, it doesn't bother us, it's referred to here, but just a reminder that single participant services are services of the board. right? So the policies are board services, even though you may not care for that, but that's in reality what these policies are. They're board policies.
Yeah, and that is, the reason that I referred it here is because I felt that it might be more appropriate to have a conversation with the areas that have parks, and if we want to make a recommendation or about these policies, back to the board, that seemed like maybe it would use less of the board's time than having this conversation at the board table.
So again, what these ones are, Mr. Hayes can correct me if I'm wrong, but policies that existed with the CRSRD that are very old, redundant, archaic, so on and so forth, with recommendations that we had in terms of repealing some of them and or replacing them if need be, or they were redundant because we have a current policy that's more updated than what you had here.
I appreciate that, and I wasn't clear on if we did have policies which covered the same topics, and that was my question.
Well, I think they were in the original report that we identified that, but
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to defer to understand completely whether these are duplicates or the originals of policies that have since been duplicated by the SRD. But these are, as the CEO previously mentioned, these are all fairly ancient, I believe, and put in place by the CSRD. And I'm not sure that they're all being followed rigorously. I would leave that to the planning Parks Department to comment on. But when I read them, there's certainly things in there that constrain the ability of the board and directors to make decisions about some of the parks operations or acquisitions that may not be appropriate. So I will leave that for the parks to comment further on that.
just in first before that, the report says that community services confirm that from its perspective, the policies listed here are obsolete, redundant, or administratively onerous and can be revoked. So our recommendation was to get rid of them because we have something already in place or they're just unnecessary, redundant, or obsolete.
That's all I was going to say. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, I feel like I haven't had my question answered yet. Are there other parks policies which deal with the same topics or similar topics to these that we have as current SRD policies?
Yes.
Thank you, through the chair. If I may just add a little bit of clarity here. With respect to the park deferral policy, there is no other park deferral policy. Staff does not recommend nor support a deferral policy. The only one time that we've used this in the last 15 years that I've been part of this regional district was for an application within Electoral Area C, where we had an agreement, we deferred the parkland, and it took years and years and amount of work on both part of staff and lawyers to finally obtain cash in lieu of park that was initially deferred. So we do not support that method if parkland is required as part of subdivision. Legislatively, there's a process that is followed to do that. So we are requesting that this policy be revoked and not replaced by any other policy.
Not only that, again, this was written, none of us were part of this policy. Policy is, I don't know, Director Wally's referred to policy as a number of things in the past, but it's not, has no legal authority to it. And this, if you tried to exercise this policy, the board has not delegated that authority. I don't know if they ever did or not. This policy was written, but you couldn't exercise this policy anyways as it is because the board would have to delegate this authority. And that's unlikely. So this policy in particular, there isn't a replacement, but we're not suggesting there should be one. And And if you wanted one, just realize it would have to go to the board and the board would have to authorize delegating that authority, which is super rare.
Thank you. And that, I'm not actually interested in that policy, but they were all lumped together, all four of them. And, you know, in one of the policies, it talks about being able to delegate work in parks to nonprofit societies. And that we can actually fund them directly through the SRD to do that work. So those were more the sort of areas of interest that I had. And because all four policies were part of one report, that was why I asked to refer them here. So those are the sorts of things that I was a little bit more concerned with. You know, like one of the policies is that we should have a master plan for each park. And I don't know if we're following that policy, or if we do, I think we're coming up with a parks plan in the future. That's like on the work list, but yeah, those were sort of more of the reasons that I was asking these questions rather than because I thought we needed to keep a parks deferral policy.
If I may respond to that through the chair. With respect to both of those policies, they are unnecessary, superfluous and redundant to either legislation or existing practice. The question about delegating is the wrong word there, but working with nonprofit societies, for example, and volunteers, that's just standard parks practice. We had on this agenda a service contract with the QRS to do exactly that, not because of this policy, but because that's how we manage our park plans. With respect to park master plans, we don't recommend that for each individual park. Just for some understanding and context, we have about 60 park areas in our regional district. To produce a master plan for each and to maintain it and update it would be exceedingly onerous. What we are doing instead is that we are seeking electoral area-wide policy or park planning to deal with each regional area or each electoral area park kind of holistically rather than on an individual basis. So this policy is definitely not being followed, but also we wouldn't recommend that it be followed. So in that case, revoking that policy is more in line with practice and recommended.
Thank you. And thank you, Chair, and to the committee for having this conversation, and following receipt, I would move the recommendation.
We call the question on receipt. All those in favor? It's unanimous and carried. First way, you got a motion? Okay.
I guess I would recommend to the board that policies number 5, 13, 18, and 48 as attached to the November 14th, 2025 report from the CAO be revoked.
Second.
Thank you, Director Vaness. All those in favor? It's unanimous and carried. Now, did you have a new business item, Director Lee?
I did. Would you like me to raise it now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do I have to make a motion, or can I just talk for a second first and then make a motion?
Yeah, general practice is you put motions on the floor the second and then you discuss them, but whatever.
Okay, well, at the March 11th Electoral Area Services Committee, this committee received a delegation from Lenny Keller, and following that delegation, Director Vanesh made a two-part motion. I am looking for an update on the status of the first enactment clause of the motion, which was made back then, and it was that should the licensee be found to be non-compliant with regional district zoning, a letter advising of non-compliance be written to the province. And I'm not sure if staff can respond to whether that has happened here at the table today. And if they can't, maybe I need to make a motion and bring that information back to the January East meeting.
I would prefer the motion, although, did you just read a motion or?
Not quite.
Okay, I would prefer.
That was
the
my
motion.
preamble.
Yeah, okay. The motion would be appreciated.
Okay. Oh, did you want to say something, Annika?
Thank you. Do you recall that discussion at that meeting? Also, I do believe that at that meeting, I did provide clarity that there were certain aspects potentially regarding that license that would be in open session and those that would be in closed. Anything regarding compliance and enforcement would be in closed session. So just bear that in mind if you're putting forward a motion to that effect.
Well, whatever the motion is, we'll decide whether it's open or closed. It's fine.
Okay. Thank you. I would move that staff report to the January EASC meeting regarding progress on the issue of determining if the Evans Bay aquaculture license is non-compliant with SRD zoning and advising the province of non-compliance if determined as per the March 11th, 2025 motion on the same topic. And Edith has a copy of that motion if you'd like.
Second.
If I can, Mr. Chair, can we just soften the January meeting there?
Yeah,
Um,
February?
sure.
March?
February's fine.
Okay. February, I'm fine with February.
Okay, George Benesh,
I'll second that.
Thank you. All those in favor? That is carried. All right, so we're ready for a move to terminate.
Move termination.
All those in favor? That's carried.